This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Today,
a third round of the Iranian and American dialogue was resumed in Baghdad. The two sides had announced that their talks will focus on the security situation in Iraq.
American, Iranian, and Iraqi officials held a three-way summit in Baghdad. The American ambassador to Iraq, Ryan Crocker, and his Iranian counterpart, Hussein Kadhimi, met face-to-face just like they did in their last meeting on May 28. The Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki left the meeting after he gave a speech welcoming the two sides. The ongoing discussions are mainly about the lack of security in the land of the two rivers since the American invasion in 2003. Discussing Iraq's security was a sufficient reason for Washington and Tehran to hold their first meeting since the Islamic Revolution in 1979, when their diplomatic relations were cut off.
The Iranians, we know
that the Iranians are helping the armed groups in Iraq in different ways. They provide them with explosive devices against armored vehicles, posing a direct threat to our soldiers. We also know that they support sectarian militias and death squads, which fuel sectarian tension in Iraq.
This is the American view, but Iran holds what it calls the American occupation responsible for what is taking place in Iraq. Nevertheless, some Iranians said that they will also talk in this meeting about the 5 Iranian diplomats who were detained by U.S. forces in northern Iraq. So far, no one has made a positive comment on the meeting which took place inside the fortified green zone between the old foes who have been getting closer to each other recently. There are no details about this meeting yet.
God willing, the talks between the Iranians and the Americans about Iraq will be useful and will serve our interests. God willing, our crisis will be resolved.
I think that these talks, like the earlier ones, will not lead to any tangible results and will not serve Iraq's interests. They will definitely serve the American interests.
This Iraqi man might be right. The meeting between Crocker and Kadhimi may serve the interests of their countries. But some of those who are optimistic about this meeting believe that if the two sides reach an agreement on Iraq, this may reflect positively on it.
في هذه الأثناء قال مصدر في الشرطة العراقية إن 24 عراقيا.
An Iraqi police source said that 24 Iraqis were killed and 70 others were injured when a car exploded near a children's hospital in the town of Hilla. Since American warplanes launched a strike on Al Husseiniya, the city's residents have pulled 18 bodies from underneath the rubble. Meanwhile, the Iraqi police found 24 bodies in separate areas in Baghdad.
The residents of Al-Hilla in southern Baghdad woke up at 7 a.m. at the sound of an explosion that shook the town. According to Iraqi police, a booby-trapped car exploded near a children's hospital, killing 20 people and injuring 70 others.
وإلى الشمال من بغداد في بلدة الحسينية استهدفت المروحيات.
In Al-Husseiniya city in northern Baghdad, American helicopters attacked a building where armed groups have allegedly been hiding. About 18 people were killed and 20 others were injured by the attack.
The occupation forces attacked our homes in the middle of the night. More than 15 people were killed.
Bodies were pulled from underneath the rubble during an American curfew on the town that has been in effect for the 4th consecutive day. Hundreds of residents from the nearby town of Sha'b protested in solidarity with Al-Husayniyya, demanding that the curfew end.
We, the tribal chiefs and the residents of Sha'b, are protesting in solidarity with the residents of Al-Husayniyya. They are being harmed by the occupation, shelling, destruction and curfew, which has been enforced for the fourth consecutive day.
The protesters demanded that the American forces stop arresting people and that the detainees be released immediately. The last episode in what has become known as the Bulgarian nurse's story or the AIDS case has come to an end. This AIDS case started in 1999 and ended in a guilty verdict carrying the death sentence against the 5 Bulgarian nurses. This humanitarian case in which 138 Libyan children died after they were deliberately or negligently infected with the HIV virus has been politicized amidst a mysterious deal. Faiza Allaq has the details in the following report.
With flowers, hugs, and a presidential pardon, the 5 Bulgarian nurses were met in Sofia airport. The crisis of the 5 Bulgarian nurses and the Palestinian doctor, accused of infecting 138 Libyan children with HIV, has finally ended in a surprising twist. For the nurses, it was a happy ending, which came against all expectations and court rulings of the past 8 years. Several European parties, including France and its First Lady, Cecilia Sarkozy, and the UN Commissioner for Foreign Affairs, Benita Ferrero-Waldner, helped broker a clemency deal with Libya. Today, the crisis ended in the safe landing of the 6 defendants at Sofia International Airport, where they were met by Bulgaria's president. I must say that this is a very happy day. This decision will serve as a symbol for our future with Libya. It will also open the door for a new and strong relationship between Libya and the European Union. On the Libyan side of the Mediterranean, what was once known as a humanitarian crisis has ended in a political deal. In a brief statement, the Libyan government announced that its decision was based on a humanitarian consideration and that all of its demands were met. According to the deal, the Europeans are to supply the Fatah hospital in Benghazi, where the children were infected with the HIV virus, and treat all the surviving victims. In addition, the EU must normalize its relationship with Libya, which also demanded that the US do the same. Regardless of the Libyan position, this deal has permanently closed the curtains on the most prominent nurses case in modern history. However, it wasn't clear who the real beneficiaries were.
The return of Libya to the international community was one of the first outcomes of the nurses' deal. This news came in a statement issued by France's President Nicolas Sarkozy.
I would like to announce that my foreign minister, Bernard Kouchner, and I will go to Tripoli on a political visit in order to help bring Libya back to the international community.
After meeting the Israeli President Shimon Peres, Middle East Quartet envoy Tony Blair said that he sees an opportunity for his mission as a representative for peace in the Middle East. Afterwards, Blair left for Ramallah, where he met the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. Blair is scheduled to meet the Israeli Prime Minister later today. This report by Ziad al-Halabi.
In Ramallah, there was a celebratory atmosphere surrounding the visit of the special envoy of the International Quartet, Tony Blair, who listened to both Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and his Prime Minister Salam Fayyad's requests to begin final status negotiations and not to deal with the issue of the establishment of a Palestinian state through economics. Even though the economy is important, Blair's true mission is to prepare for a regional peace conference, which will begin in mid-September. And that is why, from the beginning, his focus was on donor countries.
Aside from economic aid, at the basic level, we are always requesting to activate the peace process and to sit at the negotiation table. Any progress in the peace process here will have a positive effect in the region.
Until now, the opening of a political path depends on the Israeli and U.S. position. Also, until now, there have been no signs that this path will begin.
Within the small distance between Jerusalem and Ramallah, Tony Blair tried to test his limits of what is allowable between an economic mission and a political one. In Israel, there was no notable concern over Blair's expected leanings as playing the role of political mediator between the two sides, because he hinted publicly that it's still too early to tell.
There's a sense of possibility.
There is a sense of possibility, but whether that sense of possibility can be translated into something, that needs to be worked at and thought about over time.
Blair will address the complexities of the situation and find a suitable opportunity. We will cooperate with him to help ourselves.
Israel understands that Blair's personality, his past experience, and his warm relationship with the American president makes him a source of strength for the country. Therefore, they have embraced him after having learned a lesson from his predecessor, Wolfenson, who resigned and held Israel partly responsible for impending his mission. It is no surprise that Blair's Last Supper in the region will be served at Olmert's table, a sign of friendship between them. These indirect face-to-face talks continue under American auspices and at the expense of the role of the quartet, per Israeli demands to continue the boycott of Hamas and oversee economic projects. Ziad Halabi, Al-Arabiya, the Palestinian territories.
The IDF confirmed that Israeli Air Force jets struck a building in Gaza City today, causing substantial damage to the structure. Palestinians reported that there were no casualties in the attack. Witnesses said that a hole was made in the roof of the three-story complex and that a car outside the building was also damaged. The Army provided no further details as to why the building was targeted. However, a spokesman for the Islamic Jihad said that the airstrike appears to have targeted members of his group who were traveling in a car near the building. Hezbollah leader Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah says that Syria was ready to come to its group's aid during the last summer's Second Lebanon War, but that Hezbollah believed it would not be in its best interest. In an interview with Al Jazeera television, Nasrallah said that he believes Israel is preparing for a confrontation with Syria, but that Damascus has let Jerusalem know it will not sit idly by while Israel readies itself for war. The terror leader added that Israel has taken these warnings seriously, which is why it did not engage in a conflict with Syria. In response, opposition leader Benjamin Netanyahu said today that Nasrallah must remember that Hezbollah is a mere proxy of Iran and that it wouldn't survive a single day without Tehran's support. Meanwhile, senior Israeli military sources have confirmed that Hezbollah has restored its military capability since last summer's war, particularly regarding its medium-range missile arsenal. However, according to the source, Hezbollah's influence on Palestinian militant groups in the West Bank has been curtailed in recent months.
In a televised interview with Al Jazeera and Al Manar channels, Hezbollah's Secretary General Syed Hassan Nasrallah confirmed that the Lebanese resistance had sabotaged Israel's political campaign during its war on Lebanon last July.
I want to tell Olmert that my whereabouts are not important. What's important is that we have sabotaged his campaign of a greater Israel. I didn't want to exaggerate and say that we had totally sabotaged the campaign due to the many challenges still facing us. In addition, I give credit to our Palestinian brothers on their accomplishments during the Intifada, which led to a unilateral Israeli withdrawal from the Gaza Strip. Israel withdrew from part of historical Palestine, and this has hurt its image as the so-called Greater Israel. With this, We are talking about the strategic results of the war.
More than 23 Iraqis were killed and dozens of others were wounded in a new wave of bomb attacks in central Baghdad. This news comes in light of the ongoing chaos witnessed in the country due to Bush's so-called democracy.
As the sun sets in the land of the two rivers, the lives of dozens of Iraqi civilians, including women and children, are laid to rest. This news comes as the man in charge of the White House continues to promote his so-called democracy at the expense of the Iraqi people, who are facing daily death and destruction. Since the 2003 U.S.-led occupation in Iraq, the number of Iraqis killed has exceeded the number of Japanese killed in the atomic bomb attack on Nagasaki. Bush, who is trapped in Iraq's quagmire, is trying hard to convince the American public that Baghdad is making progress and heading towards a better future. However, events on the ground have proven otherwise. Today, more than 23 Iraqi civilians were killed and dozens of others were wounded in a new wave of bomb attacks in and around Baghdad.
This is what the occupation has brought to us. It brought death and destruction. My family was buried under this rubble.
It seems that the curse of the Iraqi war has caused the U.S. commander-in-chief to lose his sanity. Bush, who continues to rally support for Iraq's war, has promised to make the country a regional model for democracy. While Iraqis want peace and security to return to their country, Bush wants to make sure that Iraqi oil fields are in good hands.
Mike McConnell, the director of the U.S. National Intelligence Agency, said that his country will continue using coercive interrogation techniques on terror suspects because the obtained information has saved the lives of many people, but he said that the prisoners will not be tortured. McConnell refused to elaborate on the specific methods used during enhanced interrogations of terror suspects and refrained from commenting on whether the simulated drowning technique known as waterboarding can still be used under the new executive order signed by President Bush last Friday. McConnell said that the threat of using torture made it possible to obtain information from detainees that helped save lives.
بموجب المرسوم الذي نشر البيت الأبيض مضمونه فإن برنامج السجون السرية الذي أقر بوش.
According to a press release by the White House, the executive order demanded that the secret prison program, which Bush had acknowledged in September of 2006, must comply with the third article in the Fourth Geneva Convention pertaining to the treatment of war prisoners. The executive order allows judges to examine all available information about the treatment of prisoners and allows defense lawyers to obtain all documents except for the high-security ones. The director of the CIA, Michael Hayden, said that Bush had issued a new executive order with specific guidelines for detaining and interrogating detainees, granting additional legal protection for CIA interrogators. The new executive order bans the use of torture, cruel, inhumane, and degrading treatment, as well as acts of violence such as killing and mutilation. This comes 10 months after the Bush administration ended the secret prison program and the transportation of prisoners to Cuba, after the Supreme Court casted its doubts on this program. The head of the National Intelligence Agency, Mike McConnell, said that his country will continue to use coercive methods to interrogate terror suspects because the lives of many people were saved by the obtained information. McConnell refused to elaborate on these methods and refrained from commenting whether the stimulated drowning technique known as waterboarding can still be used under the new executive order signed by Bush on Friday. Human rights organizations said that the presidential order does not ban controversial coercive interrogation techniques, which include waterboarding, sexual humiliation, sleep deprivation, and the forcing of prisoners to stay in painful positions for extended periods of time. Last September, the Pentagon ordered that the United States soldiers adhere to regulations similar to the ones presented by the White House. Many human rights organizations said that all methods of torture that were mentioned in the executive order were already banned by the United States federal law and condemned the fact that the executive order did not address the stimulated drowning technique known as waterboarding.
بأنه يغرق.
As the latest Taliban deadline approaches, negotiators are frantically trying to obtain an agreement for the release of the 23 South Korean hostages still being held in southern Afghanistan. South Korea's President Roh Moo-hyun has called on the country to remain calm, saying the government is using effective means to resolve the crisis. Here's Melissa Chan.
Hundreds of anti-war protesters turned out in central Seoul on Monday evening for a candlelight vigil calling for the hostages' safe return. In trying to get them home, this is uncharted territory for the South Korean government, dealing with kidnappers, dealing with the Taliban. On Tuesday, the country's president appealed for citizens to remain calm while warning of the challenges ahead.
There is no basis that we can be sure of a good outcome just because the initial response was good.
Negotiations are hitting problems as a spokesman allegedly representing the Taliban expressed frustration.
We are extending our deadline for another 24 hours so the Koreans can directly get in touch and solve the issue or put pressure on the Kabul administration to solve it.
If South Korea fails to assert itself soon, the likelihood of a safe conclusion for the hostages will diminish. The head of the South Korean delegation in Afghanistan, Cho Jong-pyo, has no background on the Middle East, but he faces the challenge of trying to free those kidnapped.
This is a part of the world that the Korean government really doesn't have much expertise or background. So I'm sure they're struggling to get up to speed on, just what the situation is they're facing and who they're facing.
Officials tell us the president's office is working around the clock to determine the best way to move forward. But very little information is coming out on how the government's dealing with the crisis. The South Korean government's tone has been cautious. They've been emphasizing their plan to withdraw troops from Afghanistan by the end of this year, adding that theirs are non-combat units providing medical and relief services. Family members of the hostages can only hope negotiations are working.
It is true that we have been nervous with each deadline, but we trust our government more than before because we realized our government has established some channel for negotiations.
The hostage situation has touched off many questions in South Korea, including the country's military contribution in not just Afghanistan, but places such as Iraq and Lebanon. Some activists have been demanding an immediate withdrawal. Negotiations are critical because if they fail, the Afghan military has said they are ready to move in and rescue the hostages by force, a last resort option that would be dangerous and violent. Melissa Chan, Al Jazeera, Seoul.
Clashes between fighters and Pakistani security forces near the northwestern border with Afghanistan have left 20 fighters and 2 soldiers dead. This as the White House reaffirmed Pakistan's role as an important ally in America's war on terror. Recent comments about a possible U.S. incursion on the Pakistani border to stem an al-Qaeda resurgence have sparked anger in Pakistan. Sohail Rahman reports.
This is how the marketplace looks like in Miran Shah, capital of North Waziristan. Closed shops and empty roads, except a few shops that defied the prevailing fear and carried on their activities. The same applies to those boys who are determined to play, despite the feeling of fear of a possible US strike.
I think there has been this notion afoot, or at least an attempt or an inclination somehow we're going to invade Pakistan. We always maintain the option of striking actionable targets, but we also realize that Pakistan is a sovereign government and a very important player in the war on terror.
The collapse of the peace agreement between the government and the tribals is obvious through the targeting of the new army posts, contrary to the peace agreement. The mediators between the tribal groups and the government call upon the latter to respect the accord. Washington continues to accuse the Pakistani government of allowing militants to operate from their territory, a claim that's denied. The Pakistani government reiterated that any attacks on the tribal areas by a foreign power would not be tolerated by the government, the tribals, or the Pakistani people. They say in their statement, any such action will only further deepen resentment and will be irresponsible and dangerous. A warning may be that you can only push a country so far before they bite back. Sahil Rahman, Al Jazeera, Islamabad, Pakistan.
Wednesday, July 25th, marks the birth anniversary of Imam Muhammad Taghi, the 9th Shiite Imam. JNN English News would like to offer congratulations to all viewers on the joyful occasion. Another round of talks between Iran and the IAEA resumed today in Vienna as the door remained slammed on cameras. Envoys from Tehran and the IAEA discussed inspection by the agency's experts of Arak heavy water reactor in central Iran. Afterwards, Oli Heinonen, IAEA Deputy Director General, and Iran's Deputy National Security Chief Javad Vaidi spoke to reporters.
This time we agreed on certain fixed time schedule. Some events will take place next week. Our inspectors will visit the Arak reactor, as we agreed last time, and then a week later some inspectors and team will go to talk about other outstanding issues such as the plutonium contamination.
We had a good discussion and we had a constructive progress in this meeting. Also, we fixed the next meeting on 20th of August in Tehran. Now we are going to move forward in the best mood and with the best effort.
Iran's Hassan Kazemi-Roumi and America's Ryan Crocker faced each other for the second time in less than 2 months to discuss Iraq's security issues only. Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki told the meeting Baghdad reaches out to both Iran and the US to restore stability. The talks also agreed to set up a three-way security committee to explore ways to tackle Iraqi problems. Iranian and US experts will meet tomorrow. Kazemi-Roumi told reporters later that some failures by US forces in Iraq were discussed in the meeting and the American side fessed up to them. The Iraqi foreign minister, who was present at the meeting, characterized the talks as positive, saying efforts to help security make a comeback to Iraq came up for discussion today. A joint session of the Iranian cabinet and parliament was held hours ago to discuss issues related with the government's recent decision to enforce petrol rationing. President Ahmadinejad told the session the measure is a major step by the government and serves the national interests. He further said high petrol consumption in the country has only brought a surge in air pollution as well as waste of time and energy. Ahmadinejad said any possible move to offer fuel at a price beyond that of the rationing would trigger a 100% inflation. The president went on to say the economization of gasoline will annually see 700 kilometers of railroads built, refineries completed, and more families covered by the health insurance.
The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. Please visit linktv.org/Mosaic for more information about these broadcasters or to view previous Mosaic programs, obtain program transcripts, or receive the weekly Mosaic Intelligence Report. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation, the Otto Haas Charitable Trust, and by committed Link TV viewers like you. If you value this program, please send your tax-deductible contribution to Link TV, either through the website or the mailing address listed on your screen. This program was brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. television network devoted to global and national news, with uncompromising documentaries and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.